it's Em, here to talk about Toronto, the third episode in the Vampire Lestat. Apologies, my voice is kind of hoarse. It's kind of coming and going lately, thanks to some sinus allergy issues, but I will do my best to get through this with a minimum of whatever. In this episode, Daniel interviews another vampire, namely Lestat. He sets it up, and a big chunk of the episode is him goading Lestat, talking about his stutter, asking about his mother and his first love, and I guess the point is to try and figure out the places where Louis either was wrong or lied. So Lestat pulls a fast one by doing the last part of the interview telepathically. So Daniel thinks he's getting it on video, but it's just Lestat sitting in a chair staring. So that was kind of a fun trick. Basically, Lestat describes, not completely, but to some extent, he describes his relationship with Nicolas de l'Enfant, or Nicky. Spelled in the subtitles here with a Y, but in the book with an I, because in French we wouldn't use a Y, we would use an I. So that's a small thing, but I noticed. So, I don't know how people who haven't read the books are understanding this story, because it's bouncing around so much. And to me, I feel like if I didn't already know what I was looking at, I would be very confused. But that could just be me. I'm pretty easily confused, so maybe smarter viewers than me are not having a problem. In the book, Nicky and Lestat come from the same town, Auvergne, right? Lestat's father is the Marquis de Valois, and they are poor. Nicky is the son of the draper, or in this episode they said tailor, which I think is just a word that more people would be familiar with. He has gone away to school and come back because instead of learning anything useful, he fell in love with the violin and wanted to become a violinist, so his dad brought him back to Auvergne. And Lestat and Nicky reunite when the townspeople come to Lestat's home to present him with the wolf fur cape and some new boots. So this red velvet cape with the wolf fur from the wolves that he's slain, because in the book that takes place in the winter. It's snowy, it's cold. Lestat kills the wolves because the wolves are starving. I mean, it makes sense, right? Like, it's winter and the wolves are starving, so they're eating the livestock. So Lestat remarks upon, like, oh, this beautiful young man, and then he realizes he knows him from childhood. It's Nicky. They immediately reconnect. They start hanging out together in Auvergne, like these long philosophical talks. It's not an immediate let's fall into bed kind of thing, because Lestat has that, but he also has this desire to connect with people, which I think we're kind of moving towards understanding in the series, but in the book it's definitely very clear and more immediately clear, I guess. He and Nicky eventually do run off to Paris together because Lestat wants to be an actor, Nicky wants to play violin, they get jobs at the theater, yada yada yada. That much is the same. Nicky being captured by the Children of Darkness in Paris and tortured in order to get Lestat and Gabrielle to respond does happen in the books. The Children of Darkness are led by Armand. I don't know if that's supposed to be some big reveal in the series at some point, but Nicky is turned into a vampire by Lestat. He does ask for it, and then Lestat gives him the dark gift, as they call it. This is all directly from the book. A lot of the dialogue was actually directly from the book, which I appreciated. disaster, my son, and Magnus calling him wolf killer, and the light is going out of your blue eyes and this kind of thing. That was all direct. Nikki's death is very different here. In the book, it's a little more complicated. Lestat and Gabrielle have already left Paris. They are on their way to Cairo. They're looking for Marius. And Lestat and Nikki are no longer even friendly. Nikki absolutely hates Lestat at this point. Lestat has given Nikki the theater. Eventually, he will suggest to the Children of Darkness that they make it their new home and, start fresh. And Armand resists and eventually does finally agree to join and lead the theater, even though technically Nikki is the one Lestat gives it to. That's neither here nor there. Lestat and Gabrielle have left. Nikki is driving Armand crazy at the Théâtre, and so Armand starves Nikki for 5 days and cuts his hands off, with the understanding that the hands can be reattached. If they're preserved, then they can re-knit onto the body. So this is not Nikki cutting off his own hands, and this is not, oh no, he has no hand ever again. This is a very different situation, although it feels like a lot that Armand's like, you know what though? I'm just going to lock you up, starve you, and cut your hands off because you're that irritating. Okay, but afterwards, Nikki decides he doesn't want to continue, so he tells the other vampires to go out to this place they call the witch's place, because the thing about the witch burning is true to the book and is part of Lestat's horror of death. Okay, that part was also very true in the books. Lestat has this absolute terror of death, and I thought that was brought out really nicely in this episode, his reaction. But they build a bonfire, they have a sabbat, and Nikki jumps into the fire. So it is Nikki's choice in the book. And Lestat learns all of this through a letter because they send him Nikki's violin and write down what's happened, because that's the only way Lestat knows everything that's going on in Paris while he and Gabrielle are traveling. Here, obviously, I think they wanted Lestat's horror to be more immediate. They wanted him there to witness it. I don't know if they just want to make Armand more villainous by having him... It's kind of... They're making Armand even, I guess, maybe more complex, because he's doing it because Lestat needs him to, and Lestat can't do it. I don't know. So, a few little differences, but I think the overall tone was definitely on. Afterwards, Lestat takes off in a car. He's hallucinating Magnus, I guess, and he crashes, survives, obviously. But meanwhile, Louis has, after Raglan James kind of pinged him, I don't know, he goes to where he knows Killer, who is also Bruce, who assaulted Claudia, right? Back when. He goes to where Killer and his little nest of vampires is living. He takes care of the underlings, waits for Killer and baby Jinx to get back because it's their wedding night. I don't know if at this point that means that Jinx has been turned or not. He reads the pages from Claudia's diary, and as he's reading them, we're getting flashbacks to Lestat's being turned by Magnus. Again, very true to the book. Magnus is at the theater watching Lestat when he's an actor and whispering wolf killer, and then he's hanging around outside the window of Lestat and Nikki's garret, and Lestat thinks he's kind of losing his mind, and then Magnus kidnaps him, brings him to this literal tower that he lives in outside of Paris, and puts him in a cell with corpses of other blonde guys, because Magnus has a type, and says, well, none of them were strong enough, but I think you are. So Magnus wants Lestat to ask for the dark gift, and Lestat refuses. In fact, he doesn't want anything to do with whatever this is, but Magnus forces it on him, and with very little instruction, jumps into the fire and leaves Lestat to figure things out. I mean, he leaves a vast amount of wealth, and he leaves this tower to live in, and, whatever else. I can't remember if there's some, notes or something, or if he just tells Lestat a few things, like, go sleep in the crypt, or whatever. So, yeah, a lot of jumping into fires, which I understand is how vampires can be obliterated. Although Armand is a daywalker, according to this series, which is not a term that's used in the books. In the books, the older and more powerful you are, the earlier you can get up and the longer you can stay out. And at one point, Lestat even goes and lays in the Gobi Desert and isn't, destroyed. He just gets a tan, basically. But that's because he's drunk from Akasha and he's very strong and powerful and whatever. So I don't know what we're going to do with this daywalker thing, but we'll see. Louis then goes off to a cafe, and the waitress looks exactly like Claudia. Her name tag says Regina. We know from the book Merrick that Louis sees Claudia's ghost pretty regularly. So, one interesting thing, too, is that Lestat tells Daniel that his mother is dead. Well, he tells Daniel that his mother was a vampire, and that she died in her vampire toddlerism. And Gabriella is sitting there just kind of like, what? I mean, it's true that they are not wanting anyone to know that she is his actual biological mother. So she's going by the name Sophia right now anyway, but it was kind of a bizarre why though. I guess we weren't going to get that reveal. Lestat's still playing some things close to his chest. We get Alex, the band member who has left. He's in Monroe, Ohio, and he's at an AA meeting saying, look, the band I was in, I left it, and now they're getting more and more popular, and it makes me want to drink myself to death or whatever, but here I am. And of course we do the slow pan around the circle, and there's Armand at the AA meeting, going by the name Arun. And then we get Lestat's Toronto concert, and he's again kind of imagining or hallucinating Magnus and Nikki in the crowd. I think we're seeing, slowly peeling back the layers of Lestat, right? From the over-the-top to the, slowly more tender-hearted. And, again, this version of Gabriella, in this, in the books, she's cold, she's aloof, but she's very practical, and she loves Lestat. And she loves his tender-heartedness, even though she sees it as slightly weak. It's maybe one of the reasons she wanted him to be a hunter, and, because he needed things to do, because he's restless, but also she wanted him to build up a little bit more strength, right, in a number of ways. And in this, it's almost like she doesn't encourage that in him. She doesn't admire that in him. She brings out the worst in him, which I said last time. And so I can't like her as much. She's not likable, and maybe she's not supposed to be. I don't know. I like this episode more, maybe because there is less Gabriella in it. We get a sense that Daniel might be tipping towards the not entirely mentally stable. In fact, Lestat mentioning vampire toddlerism is kind of a little poke at Daniel too, and they don't all survive very long. Again, we're jumping around a lot. It's fine, I guess. it's patchy. But I think, again, we're slowly kind of uncovering more of Lestat's personality. He's very brash. And then we start to see that there's some depth there. He's always been a complex character, but we're seeing just how complex. I think Sam Reed's doing a really nice job of that, because that's not easy to pull off. I will say that last song with the loneliness one or whatever, like after the episode ended, I had Green Day's 21 Guns in my head, and I feel like maybe there's something in that song that like sounded just enough like 21 Guns for me to be like, oh, I'll have to go back and listen to it again maybe. I understand some of the changes they're making. I can't decide how villainous they want Armand to actually be here. Armand in the books, his defining characteristic is that he can't go from like century to century without finding someone to walk him through it. So when he's the leader of the Children of Darkness, and he needs Lestat to help him step into like the 1700s, and then he meets Louis in like the 1800s, and he uses Louis to understand the modern, the more modern world, and then eventually he attaches himself to Daniel, and Daniel, teaches him how to use a telephone, which I still think is just the dumbest thing ever, but I'm like, as Daniel says, what are you, an immortal idiot? So that is like Armand's character in a nutshell in the books. Clearly, this Armand is manipulative in a similar way, but a lot more savvy, a lot more capable of doing things on his own. So then it kind of becomes, then what's his ultimate motivation? Because in the books, it's very clear what his motivation is. In order to survive, he needs to progress through these centuries. But in this, it's like, what does he want? That is an interesting question. Anyway, I digress. If you've watched it, your thoughts, please. If you've read it and watched it, your thoughts on some of the changes. Do they work for you? Don't they? Is this version of Lestat working for you? Does this version of Gabriella, I don't know. I can't with her. Maybe I keep hoping like something will happen but she's very one note, I feel. In a cast full of very complex characters, she seems very one note, and that's saying something considering she's one of the only female characters at the moment, because Claudia's gone. I mean, we've got Christine, but she's kind of a non-issue. Maybe Baby Jinx will be interesting, but she wasn't in that first episode, so I don't know. But yeah, I'm reading a couple books. I will have book reviews probably later this week, if my voice holds on that long. But until then, take care.